All right, I like to talk about my mom. And as an adult child of an alcoholic, I speak often about my mother and her addiction and the effects that that had on me. But I'd like to speak today about my mother as a whole human being. When I was a little girl, I followed my mother around like her shadow. To me, she was the most beautiful woman in the world, inside and out. On the outside, she was just gorgeous. She was stunning. People would turn and look at us wherever we went. And she had this long brown hair that was 80s perfect, permed, and pink and purple heels and shimmery pink lipstick. She was absolutely stunning. And I was so proud of her. But I was even more proud of who she was as this very sweet and kind person. She had an extremely kind heart for everyone in our family, in our community. I remember when something like an illness would happen or a death would happen in someone's family, in our network of people, she was always so quick to help them in some way. And at minimum, we were always praying for that family. She had has a particular soft spot for children. And I remember when there would be a missing child in the news, my mother would be distraught, like for days, as if we somehow had a personal connection to that child or that family, and would point out, if a child was being, mistreated in a store or a restaurant, she would really feel for that child. And in my elementary school, my mother could always keenly tell who was the left out or the teased one, and she would always reinforce to me the importance of giving that person extra kindness, whether it was not laughing at the teasing or engaging in whatever bullying was going on, or simply smiling or complimenting or making them feel a part of it. My mother believes wholeheartedly in the power that every single person has, and she would often say you have to balance the bad in that classroom and have more good. And I'll always remember that. I also remember she would always root for the underdog or the misunderstood in movies and TV shows. And I remember she made me watch The Elephant Man, which is a movie from the 80s about this disfigured man who people come to realize has a tremendous soul. And I didn't want to watch it at first. I thought I was going to be scared by it. But she wanted me to watch that because she said that what really matters, what is the essence of a person, is what is inside. And my sister often tells the story of, when my parents, barely made ends meet themselves, my mother would buy brand new winter coats for the children in my sister's school who my mother knew his family couldn't afford, and they would be so cold on the playgrounds. My mother would do that. Just a very kind person. And if you met my mother today, you would agree she is an extraordinarily kind, nice human being. This is who my mother is. And I'm very grateful to my mother. I believe she gave my sister and me a lot of great qualities, particularly related to compassion and not judging people and having respect for other human beings, because you just don't know what they're going through. You haven't walked in their shoes. I also think, even being an adult child of an alcoholic, in my experiences that she didn't intend for us to have given me the opportunity to help other people. And for that, in many ways, I'm grateful too. Over the years, my mother's alcoholism worsened, and I was so certain that I could fix her, that it was my job to fix her, and like anything else, it could be cured. I just needed to find the right solution for it. My mother would not talk openly about her addiction, and the fact that she would refuse to get help was so baffling and frustrating for me. See, there was this whole side of my mom that was veiled to the rest of the world. It was a very sad and confusing side of her. And my mother never, and still doesn't, drink around other people. She doesn't drink at weddings and functions and parties. She doesn't go to bars. She drinks alone. And to me, that it's even sadder. So there was this whole side of my mother that I never saw or understood, and she never talked about it. And so I was so confused. I had no understanding about addiction, none at all. I had no true understanding of the trauma she had in her childhood and young adult years. I didn't understand what she woke up with every day. I didn't understand addiction to know that it was much more difficult than simply stopping or agreeing to go to meetings or treatment. I just didn't understand any of it. I feel like if I had had that education, a lot could have been different in my life and my father's life, my sister's life, my mother's life. I spent so many years just so focused on my mom and trying to fix her and get her to stop drinking that I became the adult in the family, and I didn't allow my mom to fall hard enough to have to become an adult. And in that way, I feel like I removed her dignity as a human being. And as I was taking on that tremendous responsibility and essentially raising my sister and all the things that I did, my full story is linked above, I had such strong emotion, resentment and anger and frustration. I remember yelling at my mother. I remember hanging up on her, storming out of the room. Like even the sight of her when she was drinking or not drinking, I was so frustrated. I remember one time I smashed a peanut butter sandwich against the kitchen wall because I was getting ready for school and making my lunch, and she came out and was so hungover, and I just was filled with such anger about it. I remember like in later years getting into even physical confrontations with her because it got so bad. And in so many ways, I feel like I harmed the situation because I was so involved and I had taken away the respect and the dignity that my mother should have had. Now, I don't blame myself. I don't have any guilt because I simply didn't know how to cope with it any other way. I didn't have the education or the resources or the skills. I had no outside influences helping me see what the path was. When I started finally getting educated and healing and getting better myself, that's when I was really actually appalled with myself of how I behaved, how I treated my mother. I really didn't love her enough during that time. How I treated my father, I was so resentful to him about his codependency and not solving it. As it goes with the 12-step program, by healing as an adult child of an alcoholic, I recognized that I had actually harmed my family, harmed myself, and that was a huge step in my healing journey to recognize that, apologize, and be able to move forward. I just wish that I could save my mother from this. And the more people I talk to who love people who face addiction, they just seem to describe their loved ones as I have described my mother. It seems to take the most extraordinary people in our lives, the kindest, the smartest, the funniest, the most wonderful people. So today, when I think of my mother, I focus on the thoughts I have of her in my early days when I was a very little girl. I focus on her as the beautiful person she is, inside and out. And I've let go of all the memories and thoughts about who she became when she was drinking and the destructive effects of her addiction and the sadness of the fact that she has never accepted or embraced help for herself. I focus on the human being, the very good human being I know that she is. I hope you are so well in your journey that you are taking very good care of yourself, that you are actively building the life that you want and deserve.